What's going on, Headliner Nation? Kyle back with the Fantasy Headliners. And yes, week 12 is kind of bleeding into week 13 here with a game coming all the way into Wednesday afternoon. And even week 13 is going to look a little bit different as well. But we're still fighting through it, and we're still setting fantasy lineups so we can get into the playoffs or secure a playoff spot, whatever it may be. But we got to prepare for winning that championship. Week 13 is going to look a little bit different as well, including all the games on Sunday. There will be no Thursday night game this week. There will be 2 Monday night games, and there will be a game also on Tuesday. So things are going to look a little bit different this week, but that's okay. That's what the plans are moving forward, and we're just going to have to work our way around it. Last week, taking a look at the accuracy percentages, week 12, 65%. Now, this does not include any players from the Pittsburgh and Baltimore games. So this percentage, yes, a little bit low at 65%. But remember, I had everybody from Baltimore listed as a sit, and then from also over on Pittsburgh, I've got Claypool, Johnson, and Juju all listed as start. So the percentage itself could end up being a lot higher by the time that game is done, but we took those out so we could, not take anything for granted there. I mean, that's going to be a situation to watch with that game. Hopefully they'll end up playing it. At the time of this recording, they had not played yet. They were supposed to get into that game on Wednesday afternoon. So maybe by the time you watch that game will be done. And hey, maybe the percentage would be a little bit higher. But let's go ahead and jump into our matchups on Sunday. And we're going to kick it off this week with Cleveland and Tennessee. And for Cleveland, it was good to see Jarvis Landry kind of break back out again last week and see that connection that we've seen before with Baker Mayfield. I went with Higgins last week because I thought the Higgins matchup might present a little bit more opportunity for upside, but it was the Landry matchup that ended up doing that. So that was good to see from Landry. But Landry does have 11 targets in 2 of the last 4 games. And in the bad weather that they've had in those last 3 games, hopefully that is all behind him. And that's really what has kind of pushed some of his ceiling and his floor down to the very bottom because of that weather. Other people blame it on different things, whether it be Baker Mayfield or the fact that they run the ball. But you have to keep in mind they've played in some really, really bad weather over the last 3 weeks. But 11 targets in 2 of the last 4 games. So hopefully that is a trend that we continue to see moving forward. And that's why I have him listed as the lone start this week for Cleveland. For Tennessee, Corey Davis and A.J. Brown are both going to be starts for me. Now, depending on Adam Humphries, if he were to come back, then Corey Davis may end up changing. Over the last 3 weeks, though, Corey Davis is the wide receiver 23, and that's based on volume alone. He hasn't even scored a touchdown through that time, and he's still the wide receiver 23 based on that volume in half PPR format. So he's been a guy that you can plug in as a low-end wide receiver 2 and a strong wide receiver 3 in basically all formats. For A.J. Brown, again, anytime that he's on the field, he could go for a huge touchdown. We saw it again last week. There was some concern whether or not he would bounce back against Indianapolis. A lot of people pointed to those numbers that we saw kind of in that first meeting against them. But I reminded everybody as well that that was based on there being a couple of big drops in that game, or it would have been a much better matchup. Well, A.J. Brown did bounce back and had a huge matchup last week, or had a huge game last week, and could have the same this week as well. Las Vegas gets a chance to rebound this week, and who better than the New York Jets to get that opportunity against for the Las Vegas Raiders. Last week for Hunter Renfrow, I've got some questions about him. He's still a sit for me. That 9 targets last week is more of an outlier because he hasn't had more than 4 targets over the last 4 weeks in any game. So not really looking at Hunter Renfrow as being a guy that's going to consistently get those 9 targets. Last week they went down big. They went down early. They were forced to kind of move away from their game plan and just sling it all over the field. And that's part of the reason why. So I'm not going to go with Hunter Renfrow as a start, but I will go with Nelson Agholor as a start. I think Las Vegas is going to bounce back here going up against the Jets, and Agholor is going to have to be a part of that. 5 of his last 7 games, he does have 50-plus yards, so he's being a guy that's targeted quite often by Derek Carr. And again, I think they will bounce back and be just fine this week against the Jets. For the Jets, only 1 start for me this week. Unfortunately, I am moving away from Jamison Crowder for the time being. With Denzel Mims and Brashad Perriman both being on the field, Crowder just hasn't been as valuable as we saw in the beginning of the season and last year. Perriman does have 234 yards and 3 touchdowns since week 9. And we know they're going to have to throw the ball consistently, right? Perryman and Mims have been their big play guys. They've averaged over 16 yards per reception in their last few games. These are guys that can go deep down the field and will continue to do that because, again, they're going to be throwing the ball an awful lot. They're not going to have a whole lot of leads. Probably won't have the lead against Las Vegas. Perryman is a guy that can take it to the house and have one of those big days and be a guy that could be an easy wide receiver 3 for you. For Jacksonville going up against Minnesota, a lot of this is going to depend on whether or not DJ Chark gets back this week. So please keep in mind, this is all subject to change based on that. And this is a good time to remind everybody that if you watch the start and sit videos, you really got to pay attention throughout the entire week, especially on guys that are questionable or ones I specifically mentioned in this video as being guys that could be updated throughout the week. I saw some of you last week come back to the video and say, hey, great call on sitting Allen Robinson. However, in that video, I said, hey, Allen Robinson is a sit for me right now because both Trubisky and Foles are injured and may not play this week. But on the live show on Saturday night, I let everybody know, hey, now that we know Trubisky is starting, Allen Robinson is a start for me. And look at that. He scores 2 touchdowns. So for those of you that saw that last week and thought I made a bad call there, I didn't, because these change throughout the week. These are all preliminary at the beginning of the week with the information we have. But as things change, we update you. So that's why it's so important to follow along. Check out the rankings videos, ask questions, and we will update you throughout the week if I say about specific players. So back to DJ Chark. This is a specific player I'm saying we got to check back on this week. Because as of right now, I'm listing him as injured, out, and doubtful. He did not practice at all last week, didn't play last week, and he could be a start this week depending on the day that he practices. As of right now, he has not practiced yet this week either. So as of now, I'm going to list him as injured, out, doubtful, and I'm going to go with Collin Johnson to kind of follow up that performance that he had last week. The rookie last week, kind of came out of nowhere for a lot of people. He goes 4 receptions, 96 yards, and a touchdown, and that was on 8 targets. I was kind of expecting Keelan Cole to be that guy and have that type of performance, and it didn't happen. It was this Collin Johnson. So I'm going to go with Collin Johnson to maybe follow that up if DJ Chark is out. Now, if DJ Chark plays, Collin Johnson's going back to being a sit for me. But maybe there's a little bit of a connection here with the rookie, and that's something that they will continue to grow throughout the season if DJ Chark misses any more time. For Minnesota this week, just finding out a few minutes ago, Adam Thielen has been activated off the COVID list and will be good to go this week. But it was great to see last week Justin Jefferson really step up as that number 1. Caught 7 of his 13 targets for 70 yards and 2 touchdowns. Going up against Jacksonville, a team that just hasn't been good at stopping anybody that plays against them. When you have a dynamic pass-catching duo like Thielen and Jefferson, you put both of them in your lineup. With Joe Burrow going down, a collective amount of fantasy football owners held their breath as they lost potential value in Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins and other players. Well, last week, at least we saw T. Higgins bounce back with a really good week, scoring a touchdown and looking like his former self. Is that going to be something that we can expect going forward? Well, with Cincinnati going up against Miami this week, Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins, I'm going to start both of them. Brandon Allen did not do too bad last week. Higgins still saw 5 targets. Love to see that. Hopefully Higgins continues to rely on that. We know that they're going to have to throw it, but the hope is that Boyd and Higgins can establish some type of yards after the catch. With Brandon Allen, they're probably not going to be able to move the ball deep down the field too often. They're going to have to get a little bit creative with their offense and what they're doing. But Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins are 2 guys that are very capable of helping with that. So hopefully with another week of Brandon Allen being under center, another week of practice, these guys can both get a little bit more comfortable and they get that game plan flowing that will help them get those yards after the catch. For Miami, now, things are absolutely crazy this week, okay? So we have to take basically everything with a grain of salt and just watch the week unfold. As of right now, I anticipate Ryan Fitzpatrick being the starting quarterback come Sunday for the Miami Dolphins. If he is, then that makes Devontae Parker my Manscaped must start of the week. Devontae Parker and Ryan Tannehill, when they have been together with no Preston Williams or any really good wide receiver too, Devontae Parker has absolutely feasted. And we saw it again last week with another big week with Ryan Fitzpatrick under center. So that's why, as of right now, with Ryan Fitzpatrick being the presumed starter, he's going to be my Manscaped must start. So don't forget, if you head over to manscaped.com, you can use the code word headliners, all capital letters, and not only you're going to get 20% off any of their great products, but you're going to get free shipping as well. That's manscaped.com, code word headliners, all capital letters for 20% off and free shipping. But again, a lot of it depends on Ryan Fitzpatrick. If they come out on Thursday or Thursday or Friday and say, oh, hey, Tua is back, he's going to be the starter, that's probably going to change things for me. But as of right now, going to assume Ryan Fitzpatrick will be the starter and Devontae Parker having another huge week coming up. Indianapolis made a mistake last week, and they stepped on the tracks in front of a train known as Derrick Henry, and they got ran right over. Well, I don't expect Houston to run over Indianapolis this week in their matchup, but I do expect Houston to throw it a little bit on them. Now, this will be a little bit different. Will Fuller now done for the season? Who's going to step up in his place? First off, talking about Indianapolis here, starting Michael Pittman. Houston does allow almost 40 fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers, and part of his upside is limited because last week, 23 targets went to running backs and tight ends. And when you're going to the running backs and tight ends, that's going to limit your upside. But Pittman still led all wide receivers from Indianapolis with 9 targets. And one thing that does happen when you target the running backs and the tight ends so often, it kind of pulls that defense in a little bit, right? They kind of move forward, and all of a sudden, boom, a guy like Pittman can break a big play down the field. But the usage, the targets are still very encouraging to me, and that's why we're going to continue to roll with them. For T.Y. Hilton, brought him up in the waiver wire video in case you had some spots open and was desperate for a pickup. Was taking a look at him and possibly seeing, hey, can this performance from last week kind of transition down the rest of the way of the schedule? For me right now, it's not enough to list him as a start. He's still going to be a sit for me because Pittman continues to get the most volume. For Houston, mentioned it with Will Fuller. Unfortunately, he's going to be done for now. Brandon Cooks, Keke Coutee, both of these guys are going to be starts for me. I mean, with Brandon Cooks, he's going to have to step up, but he's been the wide receiver 11 since week 5. And with Keke Coutee, that upside might be a little bit lower, but a lot of those targets we've seen go towards Fuller. Yeah, we might see a couple more towards Cooks, but a lot of them are going to filter over to Coutee, and possibly when we talk about it in the tight end video, to Jordan Akins. But we will go with Brandon Cooks and Keke Coutee, both listed as starts this week, because if there's one thing we know about Houston, they got to throw it. For Detroit and Chicago, we still don't know if Kenny Golladay is going to be able to play this week. As of this recording, he's been a did not practice so far this week. And it is a tough wide receiver matchup as well. If Kenny Golladay can get some practice in, depending on what that practice is, we might move him back to the start column. But for right now, everybody, because of how difficult this matchup is for the passing game, everyone from Detroit is going to be a sit for me. For Chicago, Allen Robinson is going to be a start for me. Okudah is out, is still not practiced, not out, but still has not practiced. So they could be without him this week, leaving them with only Oruwariye at cornerback, which he's done a fabulous job so far this season. But Allen Robinson is going to be a start for me regardless. But if Oruwariye has to move over to Allen Robinson, that's going to leave some opportunity for Darnell Mooney to be a start this week. And again, if Oruwariye goes over to A-Rob, Mooney could definitely eat, having to face a different cornerback. He's averaged 6 targets a game since week 2. I see a lot of big upside in this game. And we know against Detroit, there is always a possibility of a big play really putting a dagger in them. We saw it last week with Will Fuller twice. One of my big questions this week is New Orleans still going to continue to try and trick us with this Taysom Hill experiment that they just are trying way too hard to make work. I mean, yeah, it's been okay so far, but they did play a Denver team last week that didn't have any quarterback at all. They had a wide receiver that used to be a quarterback in college. So, of course, it worked out for them last week. But now they've got a matchup against Atlanta, who's been playing a lot better since firing Quinn. They're probably going to have to throw the ball a little bit more this week. Is Taysom Hill going to be able to do that? That's what we're going to have to keep an eye on this week. Or do they change to Jameis Winston? Do they give Jameis Winston a little bit more opportunity? Speaking for New Orleans, if Taysom Hill is the quarterback, then Michael Thomas is the only guy that we can start. He's the only wide receiver that is seeing any type of volume right now. And as of right now, it is still going to be Taysom Hill. Unfortunately for some of us, that's what we're going to have to watch this week. So Michael Thomas will be a start for me. For Atlanta, a lot of this will also depend on Julio Jones. He's still banged up. Obviously didn't play last week. That hammy is bothering him. Will he be in this week? Calvin Ridley, a monster again without any Julio Jones. So we know he's absolutely going to be a start. And then Russell Gage, if Julio Jones is out, will be a start for me again this week. Now, one thing I did not foresee last week was Atlanta running away from Las Vegas the way they did. And that's why I had Russell Gage listed as a start. That's why the targets were limited, because they really looked towards that run game with Brian Hill and Ito Smith both carrying the ball double-digit times last week. That's what they focused on, getting up by a lot going up against Las Vegas. That is not going to happen against New Orleans this week. So with Julio Jones, if he is out, then Russell Gage will be a start for me because he will definitely get some targets. Is Seattle's defense getting a little bit better, or is Philadelphia's offense just that bad? Well, what we saw last week, it's just not looking that good for Philadelphia. So for Seattle, I'm not necessarily going to bet on them being a defense that continues to put up those type of performances. And going up against the Giants this week, even though it is Colt McCoy, I'm still going to list Darius Slayton and Sterling Shepard as starts. Now, Colt McCoy, obviously not a guy that's ever put up big numbers or ever a guy that we've always ever looked at as being a fantasy producer. But, I mean, again, this is an offense, or excuse me, this is a defense that really has not performed well this season. Colt McCoy is a veteran quarterback, a guy that knows how to lead a team, that can lead a team without making very many mistakes, and hopefully that leads to some opportunity with Slayton and Shepard, considering going up against Seattle, you're going to have to throw the ball a little bit. So it could be okay with McCoy, it could end up being a disaster, but we know that these teams are going to have to throw it. And then for Seattle, I mean, DK Metcalf is just a grown man. That's all there is to it. Absolutely pushed Darius Slay around and just made him look like he was back in Pee Wee football. That's what DK Metcalf did to Slay this week. For Tyler Lockett, flip the coin. What does it say this week for Tyler Lockett? Is it one of those big time matchups? Is it going to be an okay performance? Going up against the Giants, the good news is that Bradbury will be on Metcalf. Not that that matters for Metcalf at all, but that's going to leave Tyler Lockett to face the number 2. And hopefully if they're moving him to the slot, even somebody less than that. So it could mean a good week for Tyler Lockett if they look his way a little bit more often. Well, we've seen the upside for the LA Rams wide receivers pick up the last couple of weeks. For Cooper Kupp, over the 2 of the last 4 weeks, he has over 100 yards. For Robert Woods, over the last 2 weeks, he has 27 targets. So Robert Woods definitely kind of jumping back above Cooper Kupp now in terms of the upside of what these wide receivers have. Cooper Kupp a couple of weeks ago was getting a lot more targets than what Woods was, and then it just all of a sudden kind of switched out of nowhere. So this week for Los Angeles, going up against the Rams, Robert Woods, he might get Patrick Peterson, but I'm still going to list him as a start. Cooper Kupp definitely will be a start, because if Peterson is the guy that is on Woods, that could limit that upside a little bit, and those targets could end up going towards Kupp, which if Kupp's getting those targets, he's going to be good for 100 yards again this week, potentially. On the flip side, for Arizona, DeAndre Hopkins will be a start, but this is a tough matchup. I mean, this is a Rams team that gives up the least amount of fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers. He's also going to have to go up against Jalen Ramsey. Is Kyler Murray healthy? That shoulder doesn't look like it's fully healthy. So is that going to limit them this week? Christian Kirk is going to be a start for me, he's going to be a sit for me, a guy that's been a start for a while now, moving back to sit. And DeAndre Hopkins, even though he is a start, I do think his upside will be limited this week, and I will knock him down in my rankings just a little bit. Definitely one thing we can say about New England this year that we haven't been able to say about them in the past is that they're inconsistent. So they've been consistently inconsistent this year, which they've never been consistently inconsistent in the past, if any of that makes sense to you. So for me, not really feeling any of these wide receivers, but I'll keep going back to Jakobi Meyers as a start, because number one, they will have to throw the ball a little bit. Against a team like the Los Angeles Chargers, you're going to have to. And Myers continues to be the steadiest of options. He's the one getting the majority of targets over the last several weeks. He did have that blip a couple of weeks ago where all of a sudden Demaire Byrd came out and was that wide receiver one, but that's not something that's been consistent throughout the season. Myers over the last several weeks has been the guy that is getting the most look. So if we got to start somebody from this matchup, it will end up being Myers. Now, for the Los Angeles Chargers, we already know one guy that's starting, right? Keenan Allen. He's always a start. Dude's a top 5 wide receiver right now. You own him. He's in your lineup 100%. Mike Williams is going to go back to being a sit for me. 16 targets to Austin Ekeler last week. Good to see him back healthy and moving about. So some of that volume that Mike Williams had been getting while Ekeler was out, it's gone now at this point. And Williams, for him to be a start on any given week, he's going to need that big play. Now, if some of those 16 targets kind of start to fluctuate back towards Williams a little bit, maybe we look at him as a start again. But for right now, it's just not going to be worth it. Do I keep telling you to grab Jalen Reagor? Yes, I do. Are you going to be playing him right away? No, you're not. But definitely a guy that could be a decent option at some point this season. If they transition over to Jalen Hurts and Hurts ends up being the guy to kind of help fix things and move them around, that's great. But the problem right now isn't Carson Wentz. It's the offensive line and it's Doug Peterson not putting Wentz in positions to win and to give this offense the highest upside possible. Who knows? Maybe he figures it out. But when you're going up against a defense like Green Bay with Jaire Alexander, no, we're not going to chance it this week. Not if they couldn't do anything against Seattle last week. They're not doing anything against Green Bay this week. For Green Bay, of course we're going Davante Adams. Why wouldn't you? You own Davante Adams, you put him in. Allen Lazard and MVS, though. Allen Lazard last week, I mean, he saw some passes, but Robert Tonyan come out of nowhere last week and all of a sudden was fantasy viable again, which I don't think anybody expected to happen. So for me right now, knowing that MVS, maybe a little bit banged up still, Allen Lazard still working his way back, don't really want to risk either of these guys next week because obviously it's going to go 100% to Davante Adams. You're going to have Aaron Jones, and then maybe Robert Tonyan is a guy to continue playing right now. Everyone from Denver has to be a sit right now because we don't know what's going on with the quarterbacks. With the quarterbacks, they've already said that there could be some type of punishment incoming. Maybe not necessarily being a suspension of any kind, but maybe they do bench somebody. Maybe there is a suspension for one of the guys. I don't know. So for right now, I can't tell you to start any of these wide receivers because I have no idea what's going to happen with the quarterback situation in Denver. So for the wide receivers, they will be a sit for right now. For Kansas City, Tyreek Hill. Holy moly. Over the last couple of weeks, I've mentioned to you, I've been like, man, I just don't think Tyreek Hill gets enough love as being like a top-end wide receiver. I mean, on Twitter a couple of weeks ago, I had posted, DK Metcalf. If you're drafting for 2021 leagues right now, where would DK Metcalf go? And I mentioned Tyreek Hill still being over him for me. And I don't think anybody responded and said they would take Tyreek Hill over DK Metcalf. And I have no idea why. Tyreek Hill plays in the best offense in the league. He plays with the best quarterback in the league. And he's one of the best receivers in the league. And we saw that last week against Tampa Bay. And we'll continue to see it moving forward. Josh Allen may have lost one of his better weapons in John Brown, but he's got a guy that can step into that spot very easily in Gabriel Davis. Stefon Diggs will be a start for me this week going up against San Francisco. Even if he does get Richard Sherman, that's okay. Stefon Diggs still going to be a guy that we're playing. For Gabriel Davis, he has 70 yards and a TD over the last 2 games that he has started. So when he's been in the starting lineup the last couple of games, he has 70 yards and a touchdown. If he has no John Brown, then this is a guy that steps into that role fluidly. And we know what John Brown has been able to do with Josh Allen healthy. Gabriel Davis is basically just like a copy of that. He does the same exact thing. And that's why I mentioned him as a guy that you got to grab on the waiver wire this week, especially going up against a team like San Francisco. On San Francisco side of the ball, Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk both going to be back and healthy this week. Ayuk is eligible to come off the COVID restriction list this coming week, so he'll be able to get back in the lineup. Do we finally get them both back? Are they finally both healthy? Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk. Can't wait to see both of them on the field, and can't wait to see both of them put up some decent numbers. What can I say about Terry McLaurin? I mean, he's got to be one of the safest wide receivers in the league to start right now. He has 7 receptions in 5 of his last 6 games. He has 90 yards in 5 of his last 4 games. And even though the touchdowns have not been there this season, so the ceiling may not be that high, the floor is there every single week. Terry McLaurin is just such a good wide receiver, and he's getting overlooked right now because of the performance from like DK Metcalf. DK Metcalf, also a second-year wide receiver, kind of overshadowing him right now with how good he's playing. Terry McLaurin just not getting those touchdowns. But if you own him, you 100% start him because he's got such a safe floor right now. It's absolutely ridiculous not to have him in your lineup. For Pittsburgh, now they haven't played as of this recording, so I have not seen the game against Baltimore as of recording this. So, for that reasons, we're going to list Juju, Deontay, Chase Claypool all as starts. That's what we have been doing. That's what we'll continue to do against Washington. Washington have been very good against the pass this year, but this is all subject to change. I have not seen the game yet that's supposed to take place on Wednesday. So because of that, not sure if anyone were to get hurt. I can't look into the future. So if you're coming back and watching this after that game and anything's changed, just know that it was recorded before the game took place. As I just mentioned with Pittsburgh, the same thing with Baltimore. I have no idea what's happening this week, so I can't really talk about that, but they're going to get Dallas on Tuesday night this coming week. Dallas, for me, Amari Cooper, he's still going to be a star. We saw just an excellent performance on Thanksgiving Day again last week. Continues to be one of the most overlooked wide receivers in the league right now for whatever reason it may be, but we'll continue to go back to him. But who's going to be the second guy up? Is it going to be Michael Gallup? Is it going to be CeeDee Lamb? For me, even though Gallup has seen a little bit more of an increase in targets lately, CeeDee Lamb is still the bigger play upside guy for me and will continue to be that guy moving forward. And with Baltimore, this is a great matchup. This is a matchup that we'd like to see like Marquise Brown just absolutely smash in. But how can you trust any of them? There's just no way to trust them right now. Willie Snead, will he be back? Is Lamar Jackson going to be back? The running back should be back and fine at that point, so are they going to rely on them? Don't know what's going to happen. Dallas just got shredded by Antonio Gibson, so can they do the same thing with their running backs? A whole lot of speculation here, but the one thing that I do know, none of the wide receivers have been great this season, so because of that, I'm not betting on any of them, including in a great matchup like Dallas. There you have it, headliners. My start and sit analysis for the wide receiver position here in Week 13. Do me a favor, hit that like button down below if you appreciate the content. If you got questions over any of the wide receivers I covered today, make sure you leave those down below as well. And of course, if you're new to the Fantasy Headliners and you haven't subscribed yet, hit that subscribe button and become a part of Headliner Nation today. Have a great week, everybody. I'll catch you on the tight end start and sit show, and I'll see you on the rest of the episodes later this week. Peace out, stay safe, stay healthy. See you later, Headliner Nation.